Hi guys, I hope you're doing great today. Whether you are a fresher or an experienced DevOps engineer, you must know these Linux interview questions with your answer. For a DevOps engineer, you will be asked about the Linux operating system. So I have tried to cover up the most and frequently asked Linux interview questions with your answers. These are top 50 Linux questions with your answers. So let's get started. This is our question number 1. What is a Linux kernel? This is one of the core components of Linux operating system, and that's why the answer should be Linux is an open source operating system that is made up of the kernel, the base component of the OS. This is the brain of Linux operating system, and the tools, apps, and services bundled along with it. So if there is no kernel, there is no Linux operating system. That kernel is used in many computer systems worldwide. These are all Unix based operating systems, and Linux kernel is the core component of Linux operating system. Question number 2. What is swap memory in Linux? If you run free-m command, you would definitely see the swap memory. So it is also most frequently asked question about the swap memory. We have the physical memory on our VM. What is swap memory or virtual memory? Swap memory in Linux is an extension of physical RAM, offering virtual memory that helps maintain system stability and performance. It allows processes to continue running when RAM is fully used and prevents memory error. It means that when our RAM, actual physical memory, our system goes out of our physical RAM or physical memory, that swap memory is used and it holds our back so that there are no memory errors on the system. Question number 3. What are the core components in Linux? And there are actually 5 core components on Linux. The number 1 is definitely kernel, which was our first question, and it is the core component of our Linux operating system, which manages operations and hardware. The second component is shell, which is a Linux interpreter, and it is used to execute Linux commands. We covered 75 Linux commands in our earlier lectures, and you saw that we used terminal or Linux shell to execute all those commands. If there is no shell, where would you execute the Linux commands? So it is one of the core components of Linux operating system. The number 1. The number 3rd is GUI, graphical user interface, which is another way for a user to interact with the system. But unlike CLI, GUI consists of images, buttons, text boxes for interaction, and it is recommended for desktop systems. Developers use graphical user interface on their personal computers, laptops, and it is also one of the core components of Linux operating system. System utilities, these are software functions that allows the user to manage the computer like softwares, etc. Core component is application programs like software programs or set of functions designed to accomplish a specific task. So these are 5 core components you must know. Question number 4. What is a Linux shell, which is one of the core components of Linux operating system? We have covered Linux kernel, what is Linux kernel, and now what is Linux shell. The Linux shell, also known as command line shell or simply a shell, where we execute and type commands and get specific outputs, right? Is a program that provides a command line interface for interacting with the Linux operating system. So if I want to use or go into the home directory, I would definitely use the Linux command line or shell to type cd/home. If I want to edit any file in etc directory, definitely I would write nano command, etc shells, etc shadow. So I would definitely use the Linux shell to type all those commands. So it acts as an intermediary between the user and the operating system, allowing users to execute commands, run programs, and perform various tasks through the terminal. So actually, a terminal is a shell, and there are quite a lot of types of Linux shell like bin bash, sh, etc. We will have that question as well. So in order to run all those commands, we definitely need shell. And like for instance, if I want to install nginx, I would definitely need Linux shell to run apt install nginx. So that's the importance of Linux shell. You can also explain the interviewer about the importance of Linux shell. Question number 5. What are the types of shells in Linux? There are actually 5 types of Linux shells like bash, ksh, csh, zsh, and fish. Every Linux shell has an abbreviation, and bash is one of the most commonly used Linux shell, which stands for born again shell, and it is default for most of the Linux distributions. Korn shell is a high-level programming language shell for development for Linux developers. CSH C shell follows C-like syntax and provides spelling correction. So if you don't know their purpose, you must know at least the types of Linux shells, but I would like to explain all the types and their purposes to you guys so you have a better understanding. ZSH, Z shell, provides some unique features such as file name generation, start of files, login, logout, watching, closing comments, etc. And Fish, friendly interactive shell, which provides some special features like web-based configuration. So these are the 5 types of Linux shells. So we saw the core component of Linux operating system. As a Linux engineer or a DevOps engineer, you must know about Linux, Linux kernel, and the components of Linux operating system and Linux shell. Now the types of shell. So now we are moving along with system development to system management. These are all the parts of system management. These are the core components of Linux operating system. Now, what is an inode in Linux? Inode is a file. An inode number is a uniquely existing number of all the files in Linux and all Unix type systems. When a file is created on a system, a file name and inode number is assigned to it. So each file on Linux operating system will definitely have a Linux inode. Question number 7. Which Linux file types do you know? I'm asking you guys. So there are 6 types of files. We mostly interact with the top 2, which are regular files, directory files, directory D hyphen, which is a regular file, block file, character device file, symbolic link file, it is also commonly used, and socket file like mysql.sock file, socket file, symbolic link files. So these are file types you must know. Question number 8. What is the difference between Telnet and SSH? And the difference is quite simple. Telnet transfers the data in plain text, while in SSH data is sent in encrypted format, which means that Telnet is less secure and SSH is more secure, because SSH sends the data in encrypted format via a secure channel. Telnet uses port 23. Now it is also another question, Linux interview question, that what is the port of Telnet, what is the port of SSH. It is also an important interview question, what is the port of Telnet, which is 23. So it is designed specifically for local area networks, LANs, whereas SSH runs on port 22 by default and it is used for wide area networks bands. So you must know about the difference between Telnet and SSH. Question number 9. What is awk command and what does it do? Awk is mostly used for pattern scanning and processing. It searches one or more files to see if they contain lines that matches with the specified patterns and then perform the associated actions. So it is mostly used for transform data files and produce formatted reports. It means that it brings unorganized data into organized form. That is the main purpose, main function of the awk command. Question number 10. This is really a common question and you must know about the zombie processes. What is a zombie process and what could be the cause of it? How a zombie process is created? The answer is a zombie process is a type of process that has completed its execution but still has an entry in the process table. It is not killed completely. So zombie processes are typically created when a child process terminates but its parent process fails to collect its termination status. So it means that that child process is still running and it becomes a zombie process and its parent process does not know about its termination. So it becomes a zombie process. Question number 11. What does an and, this operator and, after a command do? If a command finishes with an operator, what would be its purpose? The answer is you will get your shell prompt back while the command executes in the background. It doesn't mean that the command will hold your shell. If we use the AND operator in the end of the command, you will get your shell back so that you can run other commands. Question number 12. What is crontab? You must have heard about scheduling jobs in cron. So crontab is used for that purpose. So it is a short form of cron table. Crontab stands for cron table and it is a file which contains the schedule of various cron entries that should be run at specified times. How can we edit the crontab and what does each status mean? If you want to schedule a process to run on specific day of the week at specific hour, how can you schedule that process? So you have to edit those status values and crontab -e is used to edit that cron and those 5 status. There are 5 status and those 5 status represent different time intervals like minute, hour, day of the month and day of the week. Question number 14. What is SSH port forwarding in Linux? It is also known as SSH tunneling and it is the process of transmitting data over an encrypted secure shell connection between a local and distant server. Guys, SSH port forwarding is actively used in the companies and it is one of the most secure way to access your remote servers using SSH tunneling or port forwarding. Question number 15. How to know which process listens on a specific port? Your Nginx server is running, Apache is running, but you want to know which process is running on this port 80. So we can use the netstat -lntp pipe symbol grab -w and replacing port with 80, 443, 22 and we can find the specific process running on that specific port. So you have to change the port here and this command is really important. So you have to watch what processes are running on which port. Also we can use the ls off command as well. So both commands are used. I personally use the netstat command. And also guys, it merges, you can see the pipe symbol, two commands are merged together to find the output. Netstat stands for network status, and grep will find what is running on port like 80, 443, 22, 53, etc. Alright guys, now our question number 16. What is GRUB? GRUB is a bootloader program, and it is a program which is responsible for managing the boot process. There is a file in etc related to GRUB, so you must have an overview or a general knowledge about GRUB. Basically, it takes over from the BIOS and system startup and loads the kernel into the memory. The kernel then loads the operating system and its components. So GRUB actually interacts with kernel like I said, and then your operating system is loaded. If your GRUB files and key files or boot files get corrupted, you have to run FSCK, file system check, to get your operating system back. Question number 17. How to check the resource utilization in Linux. You have your Linux VM and it gets sluggish, your websites are getting down, your apps are getting down. You have to find what are the resource utilization processes, what are the processes that are consuming a lot of memory, a lot of resources, a lot of CPU. So these top 4 commands give you a general overview of the processes and the load on your server or your VM. Free or free minus M, it displays the amount of free and used memory in the system. Top command displays the Linux processes which are currently running with your CPU or memory utilization. htop, these are all commands I have covered in our Linux commands for beginners tutorials. htop is a little advanced form of the top command, and it is interactive system monitor and process viewer and process manager. And vmstat displays the virtual memory statistics. So these are actually top 4 commands that give you an overview of the processes of the current running processes. For more detailed insights, you have to run the ps commands or ps-aux. You have to watch out the logs, error logs, server logs, war log messages, etc. So at least you must know these top 4 commands to find the resource utilization. Question number 18. What are the process states in Linux? Whether a process is ready, it is running, stop, wait, or zombie. So there are actually 5 states of a certain process in Linux operating system. And each state means something. The ready state, the process has already been created and it is ready to run. The running state means that the process is alive or being executed. The stop state means that the process finished running and was terminated by the operating system. Wait, the process is waiting for some user input. And zombie process, which has been terminated but the information still exists in the process table. So these are 5 states of a process in a Linux operating system. Question number 19. What is the difference between soft and hard links? We create soft and hard links on Linux with ln and ln-s commands. So there is a difference between the soft link and hard links. A soft link can be linked to either a file or a directory. If the original file is removed, the soft link breaks down. And a hard link is a file shortcut that links the actual contents of a file, unlike a soft link which only contains the file path. It's the same size as the original file and shares the same inode number as the original file. So in soft link, if the original file is removed, the link gets broken down. Whereas in hard link, the separate inode of that original file is created. And if you create any changes in the linked file, those changes are replicated in the original file. So in hard link, a shortcut of the actual file is created. Question number 20. What are the key files to check the server boot logs? And these are the key files: var log messages, which is often used by the server's administrators to check the server boot logs, or dmessage. Question number 21. How will you automate the rotation of logs in Linux? Logs create hard disk space to get full, so they must be rotated or purged so we don't get any issues regarding disk space on our Linux VM. So the log rotate command is used, and it is typically scheduled to run on a daily basis via the cron job. We discussed about crontab and cron job. So cron jobs are used to schedule such processes like log rotate. When this log rotate command will run, it will empty the log files and we will get free disk space on our server. Question number 22. What is FSCK? File System Check. And it is also one of the most asked interview questions. What is FSCK? And the system utility FSCK is a file system consistency check, and it is a tool for checking the consistency of a file system in Linux. FSCK also checks for file systems for errors or outstanding issues. Let me share a short quick example. For example, if you don't shut down your VM and it forcefully gets shut down on the other boot, the system will have the FSCK and it will check all the files, necessary boot files, bootloader files, and FSCK automatically fixes all the system files with issues or errors. And that's our next question, that how can we force FSCK to do a file system check? And we can use the -f-f option in the FSCK command to forcefully check the file system. For instance, FSCK -f my partition, the partition on which we want to run the FSCK. The question number 24. What is LILO? LILO stands for Linux Loader. LILO is a Linux bootloader that loads Linux operating system into the main memory to begin execution. So when it is about LILO, it is just a Linux loader. Question number 25. Which command is used to record sessions in Linux? And the answer is the script command is used to record sessions in Linux. Question number 26. What is the port number of Rsync? Like the port number of SSH is 22, port number of HTTP is 80, HTTPS 443. Similarly, what is the port of Rsync? Rsync is a famous command which is used to copy data or files or folders or tar files among remote servers, and its port is 873. Question number 27. Which is faster, Rsync or SCP? Both commands are used to copy data among servers. Rsync will obviously be faster than SCP if the target already contains some of the source files, since Rsync only copies the differences. That's the reason, because SCP copies the whole data all over again, but Rsync finds if some of the files already exist on the target server, it will skip those files. So it means that Rsync will be faster. Question number 28. What is the difference between head and tail commands? Both commands are used to view the contents of the files. So the main difference between both commands is head prints the lines from the beginning, from the above of the file, and tail prints the lines from the end of the files. Just like their name said, head and tail. Question number 29. What is the etc host file in Linux? As a DevOps engineer, you interact with this file a lot because we have to test applications on certain domains, etc. So this etc host file is a simple text file. However, it is literally it is a simple just a text file, but its purpose is huge, and it maps the IP addresses to host name. It serves as a local DNS lookup table for the system. It is a mini DNS server, you can say, on your Linux VM, allowing users to define host name to IP address mappings without relying on external DS server. For instance, if I want to test my application and I will create a local domain, myabclocal.pk, myabclocal.com, and I can map it on any private IP using the etc host file. Question number 30. How do you terminate an ongoing process? For instance, if a process is consuming CPU or memory resources and you want to kill it, you want to terminate it, then we can use the kill command followed by the followed by the PID, process ID, to terminate that process. Usually the syntax of that command is kill -9 PID, which can be 1, 2, 3, 4. Question number 31. While writing a bash script, how can you append one file to another in Linux? So we can use the operator, this sign, which appends the output of the named file. If there is file 1 and I want to append the output of that file in file 2, then I would definitely use this operator. Question number 32. What is the tree command in Linux? The tree command in Linux is used to display the directory structure in a tree-like format. You might have seen this structure like this directory and its further subdirectories, so it becomes a tree-like format, and the tree command is used to display that structure. Question number 33. What is the difference between TCP and UDP? One of the most important questions. TCP is a connection-oriented protocol, whereas UDP is a connection-less protocol. That's the main definition that you must know. But it also means that TCP requires connection prior to the communication, but the UDP does not require any prior connection. That's why TCP is connection oriented. It needs a connection. Question number 34. How do you configure a DNS client on a Linux system? Or it can be asked that which file is used to configure a DNS client on a Linux system? The answer is etc resolve.conf file, and we can edit it and add the IP address of the DNS server and restart the networking service network restart to reflect the changes. Question number 35. Name a few tools to monitor traffic on a Linux system. For instance, you are working for a web hosting company and you have to monitor the load, the traffic, the users on your server, on your app or your website. These are the commands that are specifically designed for monitoring traffic or network packets on Linux systems. ntop, which is a web-based network monitoring tool. iftop, a command line tool that displays networking traffic in real time. TCP dump, one of the most common commands, which is a command line tool, and it is used to capture network packets and display them on the console. For instance, if your server is facing connectivity issues, we can also use TCP dump to find where our packets are getting lost or missing. And Wireshark, which is a graphical network protocol, and it is used to analyze the traffic and capture traffic. So these are four tools that are used to monitoring traffic. Question number 36. Which file contains network interface configuration information? If you run ifconfig command, you can see the network interfaces on your VM, on your server, and these network interfaces information is stored in etc network interfaces file. Question number 37. How to get the public IP of any Linux VM? For instance, if you log into an EC2 VM on AWS, you can get the private IP easily. If you run ifconfig, it will show you the private IP address. But this is one of my favorite commands to get the public IP address of that VM, and it is curl. C is small caps, curl ifconfig.me. You will get the public IP address. Make sure you have curl installed on your VM. Question number 38. What do you know about iptables command? Now our Linux networking questions are coming out, and iptables, which is a firewall tool, this command is used to configure the firewall rules on a Linux system. iptables is used for configuration of firewall rules. If you want to block IP addresses, block any ports, allow IP addresses, or allow any ports, you can use iptables. We can use UFW as well. What is the iptables command used for? I mean, you know about iptables. It is used to configure firewall rules. But why we use iptables command? And the answer is, it is used to allow or block traffic based on various criteria such as IP addresses, protocols, and ports. It means that we can block IP addresses, we can block protocols, ports like ping or ICMP port is usually blocked on the Linux servers to avoid any spoofy traffic or malicious traffic. So iptables command help us. And the next question is coming about this, how we can block an IP address, which is question number 40. What would be the command to block an IP address using iptables? And this command, iptables minus capital A input, where minus S, you have to write the IP address here. You have to replace 4444. This is just a dummy IP address, minus J drop. The drop parameter in this command will block the IP address, and if we want to allow this IP address, then we will replace drop with capital accept, ACCEPT, accept. Then this IP will be whitelisted. What's the best Linux distro for cybersecurity? And the answer is Kali Linux. Kali Linux is one of the most favorite Linux distributions of hackers, and they use Kali Linux for cybersecurity, pen testing, penetration testing, etc. Question number 42. Which is the most secure mechanisms, password authentication or SSH keys, and why? You saw that we can log in to any Linux VM using the password or SSH keys, but I would recommend that we should always use SSH keys because SSH keys are more secure. That's the answer. And SSH keys are more resistant to hacking. Why? Because they are harder to guess or steal than passwords. Passwords can be guessed and can be stolen, but it is hard to guess the keys. Question number 43. How do you know if your Linux server is secure? How would you know that? Because as a DevOps engineer, you have to check active logins and previous logins on your VM. Last command is used, as we discussed this command in our commands tutorial. Check previous commands, history command is used. Check all the system processes with using top, if top, ps minus aux, etc., and check network processes, netstat on specific port, and we must terminate if we think that such processes, any processes, given processes, are zombies or unauthorized processes that are not required to run on our system. So that's how this is a daily practice. It is not once in a lifetime job or once in a lifetime process. This is one of the daily routines that we have to keep an eye on our Linux servers so that they are secure. Question number 44. Tell me a couple of steps to increase Linux server security. This is one of the very important questions. How can you secure your Linux server? And the main steps are to keep the server up to date. I mean, if there are any tools like PHP plugins or web applications, anything, we must keep them up to date. We must update our Linux kernel. We must update our Linux kernel and apply patches, create a privileged account to avoid mistakes. There must be only one account that has the sudo privileges, etc. Set up secure SSH keys and passwords. Reduce unnecessary services for added security and set up a reliable firewall like iptables. Fail to ban is also a tool which is used to block IP addresses and improve your security, server security with two-factor authentication. So these are some of the basic steps in which we can increase our Linux server security. Alright guys, question number 45. Name a few Linux server monitoring tools. And I hope that you might have worked with all of them or some of them. Anyhow, Nagios, Datadog, Zabbix, Monit, Prometheus, Grafana, and these are Linux server monitoring tools which are used to monitor the server's performance, disk space, traffic, load, etc. These tools are mostly used by the server health teams or site reliability engineering teams. Question number 46, an easy one, to name a few Linux distributions. You can expect such questions even if you are highly experienced guy, but Ubuntu, Debian, Fedora, CentOS, Arch Linux, Linux Mint, and Red Hat Linux. These are some of the most famous Linux distributions. Anyhow, there are over 500 guys. There are over 500 Linux distributions available. These are some of the most famous. Question number 47, our third last question in this tutorial. Which file stores the encrypted user passwords? For instance, you set the password of a user1 with passwd. It is saved somewhere on your system, and etc shadow encrypts that password and saves in this file. So etc shadow is the file which stores encrypted user password. Second last question. Which command is used to change the Linux system time zone? When you run date command, you see UTC, EST, GMT time zones, and if I want to change the time zone, the command which is used is time and date CTL control. Time date CTL. What does curl command do? Curl stands for client URL and it communicates with a web or application server. Curl stands for client URL. Curl client URL, and it communicates with a web or application server by specifying a relevant URL. That URL can be localhost. Like if I want to know whether my application is running on localhost, I would type curl localhost :port 8080. That's how we use this command, and the data that needs to be sent or received. So that's how we know if our application is running on that port. And that is our last question, question number 50. How can we check the architecture and distro of a Linux VM? You logged in on a VM and you don't know whether your server or VM is 32-bit or 64-bit, and the type of processor and what is installed on it. It is Debian or Ubuntu or Fedora. The uname-a command shares the architecture info of a Linux server. I would like to end our these questions tutorial with easy ones. These are some easy questions, and the file etc issue contains the information of the installed Linux distribution and its exact release. Cat etc issue, and you will find the distribution installed with its release, like 22 Ubuntu 22.04 24.04. Thank you so much, guys, and I would like you to please subscribe DevOps Molvi on YouTube. So these are some of the most frequently asked questions regarding Linux. I will try to cover more and more with more advanced questions in the future. If you have any questions, please write down those questions in the comments and I will try my best to answer each one of them. I would really appreciate if you subscribe DevOps Molvi on YouTube, like this video and share it among your friends. I will see you in the next video.